Raleigh Transit Authority meeting to order for Thursday, November 10th at 3:34. We'll go ahead and start with introductions from the left.
Linda Davis.
Nathan Spencer.
Tallulah Omokaye.
Karen Ringe.
Sarah Prato.
Jennifer Truman.
Bryce Connors.
Thank you for that. Now, I know that on the agenda, we have approval of minutes, but as David was just letting me know, those kind of just went out. So if you all don't mind, because I don't think anybody or everybody had an opportunity to view the minutes. So if you all are interested, we can roll that over till December and do September and October, and hopefully November and December, and approve the minutes then. Do we need to make a motion to that?
I think you're good.
Are there any additions to the agenda? In the House
Yeah,
meeting?
Madam Chair, I did have just a few staff items regarding future committee meetings, just to get that on everyone's calendars as we think about those committee meetings. We've already talked about this once, but I think we've talked about it at the committee level before, but we did want to talk about a new process for how we're going to hopefully schedule those committee meetings and get some feedback. And certainly if that doesn't work well, we can change it. The other thing is we did have a special meeting yesterday on suspended fares. Staff did not put that directly on the agenda as staff information. That is under Finance and Policy. Finance and Policy actually did not meet this month, but since it was already listed under Finance and Policy as an item, that is where we left that item. So certainly it'll be up to the board if they wanted to move that out of Finance and Policy to some other location within the agenda. That is fine, but our chair of Finance and Policy is not here today. So again, we'll just leave that to discretion of the board, however or whenever you would like to discuss that, we can.
Since the chair isn't here, do y'all want to move it to another committee report? Or jump into it before we get into the committee reports?
Well, do we need to move it out of the committee report if we're going to take action on that? Because I thought that was the intention based on our special committee discussion.
Yeah, I was just saying that since it's in Policy and Finance, but Policy and Finance didn't meet and the chair's not here,
Yeah, I get that.
so do you want to?
Move it
I guess I'm just
Move it
asking,
ahead.
my question is just a procedural one. Do we have to move it out of the committee in order to take action on it?
Somebody would have to step up and chair that committee report, which you didn't meet, so you would just be addressing that one item at that time, or you can move it to another committee, but you do act on items out of committee recommendation for sure.
Is there someone else here who's on that committee?
I am. I can just bring that item up when it's the right time. Okay.
Okay. Well, then let's jump into it then. Do we have any public comments?
Sorry,
Sarah?
Madam Chair. I didn't see on the agenda an update about the management contract status and when the meetings and interviews would be. Is that available today?
Yes, I think that went out as well, but Mr. Walker is here, can certainly provide us an update on that.
We can move that to staff information under housekeeping. All right, do we have any public comments? Not yet. Okay. Awesome. All right, so we can just jump into the housekeeping for the future committee meetings.
So you want to jump into staff information, correct? All right, so as you know, the way the committees are currently developed, we use the first Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of each month to actually start those committee meetings. The way the Transit Authority meetings fall, sometimes we have a split week where the first Tuesday, or the first, generally speaking, the first Tuesday and Wednesday falls before the Transit Authority meeting on Thursday. So in those cases, we're actually reporting out items that were either yesterday or the day before. And so we can't really get those items prepared if something comes out of committee, and that takes us a little bit of prep time for presentation at the board for a final vote or for final consideration. So we would request that we always move the committees to the week before the Transit Authority meeting on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So instead of the first Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, it would always just be 1 week before Transit Authority on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Now, that means that you're going to be having, at times, you will have a committee meeting in November for a RTA meeting in December. For example, I don't know if that happens, but that's just an example. That does allow us 1 week at a staff level, again, to make sure that we are prepped and prepared for any follow-up information that may have come out of those committees to report back to the board. I wouldn't say that that's been a crisis issue. I mean, we haven't run across a lot of items, but we have, even down to agendas, making sure that we do represent what needs to be prepared and presented in those meetings that come, especially the day before a Transit Authority meeting, can be a little challenging. So again, we're just putting that out for consideration. If you don't want to approve that today, that is fine. We can certainly visit that again. We are planning to, from our last adoption of that schedule for December, that's what that schedule was. It's just that we would roll that same schedule into the new year for '23. So as we enter '23, committee meetings Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, before the week of the Transit Authority meeting. So hopefully I made that clearer than it sounded in my head. But if you have any questions, please let me know.
So basically, you're saying that there might be months where the first week of the month we're in committee meetings, and then the last week we're in committee meetings.
Correct.
Just in preparation. And moving it from being standard the first week to just being the week before.
Correct.
Are there any questions? What does anybody think about that? Is everybody okay with that?
I am.
Make sense?
Does it make sense?
Somebody like to make a motion?
I make a motion to follow staff approval for adjusting the committee meeting scheduling.
I'll second that.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. There are no questions. All in favor of accepting the staff suggestion for moving our future committee meetings, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Anyone abstaining? Okay. Thank you for that. So we will go ahead and just move the meetings to the week before the Transit Authority meeting.
All right, thank you. We'll make sure that as we start preparing the city's website information for 2023, that that is reflected. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Awesome. And now it's the contract update.
Good afternoon, David Walker, Transit Division. We did send out an email. You should have received that about 2 weeks ago. I'll be glad to pull that up and resend that so that everybody has it fresh at the top of your email list. But we will be holding interviews with the 4 proposers next week at the John Chavis Community Center. And the email that we sent provided the dates and times that each one of those interviews would take place. At the request of this board, we did reach out to the unions for both the fixed route and access services and have, allowed them to provide a list of questions that they would like for the review panel to ask. I actually received both of those emails of list of questions from the 2 unions today. So we're good to go on that. We've got the information from the unions that they wanted to make sure was answered during those interviews. And I'll be glad to take any questions if you have any.
Just one, mostly for the benefit of the public, but anyone can attend and watch those interviews?
Yeah, we're not really advertising them as open to the public, but they will be open. We invited the employees. We sent out an email or a notice was posted around the facilities and basically said any employee that has the time to take off or is already off, if they want to attend, they're welcome to come over and watch. And I think all of the union officials have already made plans to be in attendance.
And you might have mentioned this already, but how many responses did we get to the contract?
We have 4 responses. And we are interviewing all 4 of those.
Anybody have any other questions?
Just my only comment is I don't see the email, so please definitely resend so that we have it.
I'll look that up during the meeting and get it out to you.
Is it a possibility that we can get invites, like calendar invites?
I'll check on that. Yeah, we should be able to send you something on your calendar.
Okay. And that way, if anybody wants to attend those specific times, they can, or at least they'll know, and it'll be automatic.
David, what's the timeline after, I know you said next week are the interviews. Do you have a timeline after that in terms of when you ultimately bring a recommendation to council?
Yeah, the review team has already met once to discuss the actual proposals. Since we decided to interview all 4 of the companies that proposed, we didn't have a second meeting prior to the interviews. We are planning to meet very soon after the last interview next week. And then our plan is, pending how that review team meeting goes, is to come to the RTA in December with a recommendation. And then the city council actually meets on Tuesday, the week of our transit authority meeting, so we won't be able to take it to city council in December. So it'll come to this board in December, and then assuming this board agrees with the recommendation, then we would go to city council in January.
And the recommendation will be for one applicant as opposed to, we're not making a decision between, we're not choosing, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we will move on to the route committee. Nathan.
All right, I will go quick because I know that we are interested in the suspended fares. In terms of the route committee, we added an item to our agenda inviting Wake County Public Schools Transportation and having them meet directly with staff and brokered sort of a process. The idea, and we've talked a little bit about this before, but the idea being that there's overlap in terms of Go Raleigh's transportation and Wake County Public Schools transportation, and is there a way to sort of reduce that overlap and maybe use the city system to really help students get around and get to school. So staff is putting a plan together to work with transportation at Wake County Public Schools in a real way. Just an interesting couple notes in terms of stuff. In 2013, they had 920 buses. They now run 560. So it is a larger process for them. But they are also doing they're running 160,000 students around, and not everyone is taking buses, but they've got a large population of students there. There's a lot of opportunity all over this for us to be able to help, for us to be able to get middle and high school students acquainted with public transit, and a way for us to help save taxpayers money in terms of infrastructure. So we're looking forward to more discussion on that. We skipped the Wake Transit Plan bus update, and we're going to have a more thorough plan update in December. That's a really big one, so anyone who wants to join us in December, that one's going to be basically what we do through 2030 with the bus plan. If you're interested in how we're going about planning the next few bus routes and how it's going to feed into BRT, come join us. We did have we did go over the work plan for FY24. Not a whole lot new. A couple positions being sort of added. Marketing is has some funds in there, and then we looked at some of the routes that are performing really well and some of the routes that are sort of having some troubles. Couple notes again in terms of key facts. Route 5 will get an upgrade to high frequency on State Street and a few other places. There will be about a 21% increase in operations in terms of budget. And then also from a capital standpoint, we're getting 11 vehicles, including one new bus, 5 paratransit, and 5 support vehicles, and 27 bus stop improvements over the next year, which is pretty cool. It also will include half the cost for the new facility, the new Go Raleigh operations and paratransit facility, and money for getting BRT South, the southern corridor, going. Lastly, we talked about the FY23 quarter 1 report. Another facts piece, Go Raleigh's down 7% in terms of ridership from early 2020, before the pandemic. That's compared to most transit agencies that are down 24%. So we are doing very, very well in terms of that. Part of that is also that our ridership is very transit dependent. So we are providing a serious need. And also one key win that I see from Route Committee, we have been pushing on staff to advocate for a change in how performance records are graded and measured, because it's been based on ridership and fare collection and stuff like that, things that really aren't key values in the last few years. So we've asked for some changes, and staff is looking at ways to better measure and evaluate, and pushing Wake Transit to actually get a better measurement for stuff. So all good things. Again, come to December's route committee meeting if you're interested in the next 8 years. Anyway, all right, I'm done.
I have a question. So what were some of the key metrics that you asked staff to look at?
So we have been pushing staff on the fact that, and pushing them to push Wake Transit because they're ultimately the ones that make the decision. But the idea is that ridership and fare collection, those items aren't good measurements. That propensity and the where jobs are and where people are living are much more valuable tools. We've also been pushing for us to be better about data. Companies like Via and others, they rely on this data to know where people are going and where they're from, what their first and last mile. We haven't been using any of that. So our customers get on the bus and they're in our system, and then they get off the bus and they're no longer in our system. Knowing who they are and where they're going is a big factor in terms of how do we better serve our population and make it more useful for them. Is that a factor of, do our riders, are they working in jobs that take them halfway across the county, or are they working in jobs that take them around the corner? And do they have an interest, and is there a value in connecting them further down the county or around? Or is there, are there specific city centers or business centers that we're missing? So really looking at measurements throughout that end, and how people are using the system currently, versus, or could be using the system currently, versus, all right, what's our ridership based on 2020 goals, which are outdated.
Okay, so I'm clearing it up. So you're saying that measurements like ridership and fares are not as of value as data, like knowing who our riders are and where they're going and what their jobs are, and if we're missing business centers?
If we're missing people, if we're not providing the service that we need to be providing, and where those populations are. It's not that fares are not important. It's not that ridership is not important. It's that based on the data that we've collected over the last 3 years, that data is useless because of the pandemic. So we've been using data like that to evaluate the last 18 months of our system due to the Wake Transit Plan, and that's not valuable information anymore. Valuable information are people using the bus to get to, say, Rex to do essential jobs that are keeping, the hospital afloat and running. That's a key indicator to us that, okay, that route is clearly there's people getting there. Do we need to do more to improve it? Maybe. But if we took it offline, would it make it harder for those people to get to their job? Would it make it difficult for us to keep healthcare a priority in the region?
Maybe I'm just confused about why, so one, how is staff supposed to track that? How are staff going to get the data of where people are going and what their jobs are? And if they have an essential job at Wake Med, and if that's why they're going. And then does it matter if people are just going to Wake Med? We know the ridership, we know how many people get on and off the bus, and we know which routes they're taking to get there. So I feel like a lot of this information is information we kind of have in the data of ridership, but then saying, well, we want to make sure that if you have an essential job that you could get there versus people just being able to take the bus because they want to and they need to get around for whatever reason. And it sounds like it's going to be a lot of work for staff because then they're going to have to get on the bus and try to survey people. So then what is that survey saying? And how many buses are they riding to survey where these people are going? And how many people feel comfortable telling Go Raleigh where I'm going on the bus?
We're already surveying them. We're required by the Wake Transit Plan. But
Can
anyway,
I add some
Jen.
context?
Yeah.
I think that the discussion was specifically around how the Wake Transit Plan measures success or failure of routes. And we had multiple routes that started right before the pandemic that were supposed to be measured to whether they had reached their ridership goals, because that was the only measurement that the Wake Transit Plan had built into it. And so what we realized as we looked at those routes was that some of them failed their ridership goals that we set in 2017 or 2018, right? But not because that route might not be important, but because of the pandemic. We don't know which reason. And so what we were asking, it's not necessarily for our staff to do, but to push higher to the decision makers behind the Wake Transit Plan update to say, hey, it might be unfair to measure the success of these routes only by ridership. And here are some suggestions of other things that we could use to continue to evaluate them that might give us a more robust answer for future bus plan updates, because I forget how often, but the bus plan update happens at a regular pace through the rest of the plan. I don't know if that context helps.
That's much better, yeah.
No, it makes sense. But I guess I'm trying to figure out if and I'm not trying to belabor the point. Does anybody else have any other, I can ask questions offline.
I don't know if this is on, but I think I understand what Nathan's saying. I understand what tool play you're saying too. But some of the tools that we have today will not give you those measurements. So think of context of if I buy a pass today, you know that I bought a pass, but you don't know where I got off. So kind of think of that like, what is your measure of success? Should we look at changing the measure of success? Like what tools you have today will allow you to do that. Change your measurements and also change your tools. So I know it's been talked about, or I don't know, it's still conversation, changing the passes will get you the data that you're looking for. You'll let you know where the person bought, where they're going, and where they got off. So
Yeah, and this is specifically, as Jen said, this is for the Wake Transit, this is for Campo. So they get to decide a little more on how this is being done for the region especially, because they do have requirements for surveying, they have requirements for all this stuff, but all those requirements were made in 2016, 2017, and it's been a very long time, and the world has changed significantly.
Right.
So.
But if the questions are not accurate or in depth, you're not going to get the right.
Correct.
Right, because just because somebody's taking the bus to Wake Med doesn't mean they're going there for service. It could mean that they're going there, then they're walking somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Or it could mean they're walking home or they're getting on a different bus. You know what I'm saying? Like,
And I shouldn't go into specifics because
I'm just
the
using that as an
reality is
example.
that we just asked for different measurements. I have my own personal sort of ideas of what I would love to have, the wish list, but the truth is that what we're asking for is don't grade us on the fact that, for example, the Northwest package failed because, you know, it was this period of time that no one was riding a bus, or that like certain routes in East Wake are just not doing very well because ridership is down.
There.
So,
Ridership's down there, not everywhere.
no, but I mean, you know, specific areas there are, you know, we need a better measurement to know what's success and what's possible versus, you know, fewer people are riding this.
that's true because, I mean, yeah, if the goal is for it's not about ridership anymore, about rider experience, it could have been that the ridership goals were too high in the first place. Okay, anybody have any other questions in regards to that? All right.
I had just one, I don't know if it's a question or comment for Nathan, the chair of Route, that whatever recommendations are made at the end, this is all going to be, there'll be opportunities for public input later on, but this is not part of the budget process, right?
This is not part of the
Right.
budget process,
Okay.
no.
I have another question really quickly, not about that, but I know that we were asking for, just to get an update really quick about the operators' open radios. I know it's kind of out of left field, but that was something that we talked about with the operators, and I know that we said that we were going to get any update on it. I was wondering if there was any space in that.
So we did do some research on that, and we can provide a report on that following this meeting.
Yeah, if you don't mind sending me an email, it doesn't have to be.
That's fine.
But I'm just trying to think of it, because I wanted to follow up.
All right.
All right, so are we going to move on to the suspended fare conversation? Linda leading the...
Yes. Our chair of the Finance and Policy Committee is not here, and the meeting we had was not a Finance and Policy Committee meeting, but since I was there, I'll chair this. Our special committee talking about fares met once in October, and during that meeting, we requested many pieces of data from the staff, and we were given that information in October. We met again yesterday, and we discussed essentially it's whether or not we want to recommend that Raleigh buses be fare-free beyond fiscal year '23. We recommended to the City Council, and the City Council already approved that the buses will be free through '23. And so our discussion was really about whether or not we want to make any other recommendations or return to the fares as we had pre-pandemic. I'll just ask anybody here if you have any questions about that, because we did have a pretty lengthy discussion yesterday. Everybody was not able to be there. But I guess the general consensus, as discussed in our first special committee meeting, was that we would have a vote today on what our positions are we would entertain a motion and then vote on whether or not to make such a recommendation. So does anybody who was there yesterday want to make any other comments, or does anybody want to discuss this in any way? Yes, Jen.
I didn't know if staff had a couple of slides that they shared with us yesterday, so I didn't know if potentially that would be useful for us to look at as we have this discussion.
But
I can certainly check on that, and we can try to load that up.
before we get to the slides, I think it would be helpful, since those were special meetings that the public didn't attend. Well, actually, that's not true. Yesterday, we did have some attendance from the public. But just to kind of put some of this in context and why we're even having a conversation now about whether or not we should continue suspended fares.
If you're get close to the mic, if you can,
sorry
with the
about that.
mask. Yeah, thank you.
What I wanted to do is put this a little bit into context about why we even had this conversation, since our fares are currently suspended. We do expect that this issue is going to come up in the near future with the City Council. The elections were this week, and we're going to have a number of new folks on the City Council, and I think it's our understanding some of them will probably want to raise the issue about whether or not we should continue having suspended fares or not. Obviously, Go Raleigh was not the only. The majority of transit systems in this country suspended fares because of COVID. And we've had the good fortune, as did many other transit systems, to have federal assistance through the CARES Act, through COVID assistance from the federal government to fill in the gap of the funds that we were not collecting because of the fares were free. And meanwhile, we've also received reports from our bus operators, from at least some bus operators, that there have been incidences on the buses of concern among the bus drivers that because a number of homeless people are riding the buses now all the time on a regular basis, that there have been some, and because a number of the homeless people have mental illness, there have been situations where bus operators feel uncomfortable. Some have felt threatened, and we've had bus operators come and speak to us at public comment. We've also had conversations with folks as well, with operators outside of here. So there is some concern that there may be a connection with fares being free and with increase in homelessness, sadly, in our community, that folks are seeing the bus as a place to stay all day. So the staff was kind enough to provide a lot of information to us about the amount of funds that we are losing. Well, we would be losing if we continue to make the buses free. Of course, this is not a conversation we're alone in having. There are bus systems in this country that are free. In North Carolina, the only bus system that is free is Go Chapel Hill, and plus the Wolf Line here in Raleigh is free, although it's paid for through the university, NC State. So of note of the information that I think you might be referring to, Jennifer, is that essentially for the last data we have is FY 18, 19, and part of FY 20, but essentially the fares cover between 14 and 15%, of the cost of bus operations, close to $3 million. Staff does project that with increased ridership and at our expansion, particularly through bus rapid transit, that we're going to continue to see increased budget costs for operating the buses. It just makes sense. More buses, BRT, we're going to have more expenses. So we're also losing revenue because we no longer receive revenue through the Go Pass program, which is funds that are paid for employees of the state of North Carolina and universities and some private employers as well. It's a not insubstantial amount of revenue, but it's less than $1 million each year. So I just thought it would be helpful to put some of this in context as to why we even had this conversation.
Thank you. And I guess another point about why we were having the discussion now is because staff is about to go into developing the budget for FY '24.
Very important point.
It really would be helpful to know, even though the amount of income from fares is not a huge part of the budget, it would still be important to know whether or not to factor in fares as part of how we're going to pay for our bus system. One of the things that this is just something that I discovered yesterday, and it's because I had not looked into it more deeply, but one of the things that was true when we were charging fares is that our system takes into account people over 50, people who are youth, and we have several programs that offer reduced fares for economic hardship. So even prior to going fare-free, one of the things about the Go Raleigh system is that reduced fares or no fares were available to people who needed those. I'm not sure that it was widely known. It might be that we might need more publicity around that. But I think some people in the campaigns or some of the politicians might have been thinking that it was yay or nay. You know, it's a much more complex situation, and it got politicized during the campaign, so that I think some people who were thinking about, oh, we should be fare-free, didn't realize that we already have a system in place for offering discounted fares.
And I'll just share those numbers. According to staff, pre-COVID, 32% of Go Raleigh ridership rode for free, and another 12% on top of that rode at reduced fares. So up to 42% of our riders were already on some kind of reduced fare.
That's right. Almost 50%.
So there were already programs in place. The question is not going back to dispel all of that and say youth ride for free, because that's something we started shortly before COVID. We already had programs for senior citizens, and if you had income issues, we have programs for that. Like she's saying, it's better to promote those things. And the conversation was centered around bringing back the fares or not, because of the increased plans that we have for transportation, the loss of revenue, not just from fares, but from companies giving us money for their employees to ride the bus, whether they ride or not. From the R line, even though it's free, it's free to riders, but it is paid for. It's not free to us, because NC State pays for that, so it's free. So the question then is, and right now the bus is only $1.25. If we went back to fares, or it was $1.25 before we suspended fares, that's a very low threshold. But that threshold is high enough to keep some of our operators safe from things like people riding the bus for safety and not just for transportation. So then the question is, do we maintain free fares for all, or go back to the programs that we had before? Not wipe out all free fares, but go back to the programs that we had before that allowed people who needed a free ride to get a free ride, and allow those who can pay for the bus to pay for it. Especially since there is funds, and even though she said it's only a little bit less than $1 million, we know our operators need an increase in pay. We know that there's a lot of money that can be used with the money that we are making if we don't need it. If we're collecting fares and don't need it, there's a lot of recycling that money can be done, that can be done with that money back into the system if we're talking about growing the transit system.
It's actually
in
close to
my opinion.
3 million.
Well, there we go.
Madam Chair, there's also, we discussed at yesterday's meeting that there actually is a third option. According to staff, we do have the technology to consider, especially if we move towards allowing people to pay for the bus with their phones, which was something we were talking about before COVID and has been on hold, but actually I've learned that the Go Triangle, Go Raleigh, et cetera, we already have a contract in place, that we have not used it, to start using smartphones for allowing people to pay for their buses, their fares. And through that technology, correct me if I'm wrong, David Eatman, that we could establish some type of sliding scale process based on determinants that we might choose that might have to do with income. Did I say that wrong?
Yeah, I would say through that technology, you certainly have unlimited opportunities. But even outside of that opportunity, if someone doesn't have a smartphone, you could have an annual pass, an income-based pass. So if someone met an income-based threshold, and certainly we would have to work with Wake County and other agencies in that regard, but certainly if there was someone in need of that pass, then they could receive an annual pass. That person would be, issued that annual pass, and it would have, identification. And it would be just like any pass that anyone paid for. It would be, issued to that person. So those things are possible. The greatest thing I think about mobile ticketing is we've found through prior surveys that most of our passengers do carry smartphones. A lot of individuals, I think, use their phones really for what we used to traditionally use for computing. I know I do most of my bills on my phone now instead of actually going to a laptop or a computer, just because it's so fast. And I think that's the norm now. So not that everyone has a smartphone, but they are very prevalent within our network. And so it does have fare capping. So even if someone didn't qualify for that income-based annual pass per se, they would, again, if they paid a certain amount, so many days, let's say they paid for 2 weeks in a row for a day pass, and that got them qualified for a monthly pass, then the next 2 weeks are free, even though they can only pay that daily. Anyway, it does present lots of opportunities, certainly in that regard, as you stated, but we could also replicate that with our contactless cards or our other swipe media.
The,
It sounds like it's still only two options.
Yes,
Either we are going to be fare-free
Yeah.
or go back to charging, however that looks, because we already, even if we did that on the phone, we still have those programs already in place. It's nothing new.
That's what I was going to say. I don't think that I don't think that we have a third option. What I want to somebody, and I'll do it if nobody else does, I would like to see somebody make a proposal that we vote on whether or not to go back to fare-based for FY24 or whether or not, or to stay fare-free. Jen, you had a comment?
I did have a comment. I think that, one of the reasons you mentioned talking about this now is because staff is going to prepare the FY24 budget. And I think that making a recommendation one way or the other at this time is premature until we see those two options in actual budget form. The operating budget for this year was $35 million. That's the presentation that we got. And yes, it's going to increase over the next several years to nearly double that by FY30 at $72 million. The $3 million in fare box revenue, which will also increase some, though we weren't able to get those projections from staff at this time, isn't covering most of our operating costs, right? It's covering 14 to 15%, which means 85% of the operating cost is covered by general funds from the city council allotted budget. And I think that if transit systems are important enough to be important to the whole city, then I think that we should look at an option of a budget that has that $3 million covered, and we ask for that. So I think, in my opinion, it's premature to make a decision right now because we have not had an announced public hearing about this. We haven't heard the public comment or opinion about this. And we need to give the space and time for the public to comment on this. Asking everyone who rides the bus to pay because there are very real concerns about safety. But as you said, Madam Chair, the $1.25, $2.50 is a low threshold. And we've always had people on the bus causing trouble for our operators, even with that threshold. So in my opinion, we need to hear a lot more public comment before making a recommendation one way or the other.
I respect, you want to go ahead,
Bryce?
Sarah?
Yeah, you go ahead.
You sure?
Yeah, I can chime in after you.
I respect your opinion, Jen, but I think that after the process we've gone through with staff, the writing's kind of on the wall. Expenses are continuing to increase. CARES Act funding is going away. Budget projections are doubling from 2020 to 2030. Hedging our bets on officials who are not here to stay. They're in temporary seats, and unprecedented levels of inflation. We're just kicking the can. The problem is getting worse. And so I think now is that time to solve that problem. And a portion of that answer, in my opinion, is bringing the fare back. And Linda, you asked for that motion. I'll make that motion that we take, we take a vote to implement that fare in the 24 budget, or make that recommendation to council.
I'll second that.
can we still discuss?
Yes, I think.
Because I also want to sort of note a couple things. One, FY20, it was 10% of the overall fixed route budget. That was on a budget that was significantly smaller than we have today. So that percentage is going to go way down in terms of how much the fares cover. Any fare increase, and this would be a fair increase because by reinstating fares, that automatically acts as an increase. So we're going to have a drop in ridership, which happens whenever you raise fares. So that percentage will go down even further. The other point that I want to make before people vote is we don't, if we've been giving out free passes and we're going to promote more to folks who cannot afford it, how is this going to affect people riding it that are riding it for free? I don't understand how this will stop folks who are using the system for that. There are much better ways for us to control that by having passes in which we can then remove from people and remove others. All we're doing in this case is we're basically saying you have to pay or you get a free pass, and you can go basically and be omnipotent on the or invisible on the system until you cause problems, and then just get another pass and continue to cause problems. So I don't see how we're fixing any of the problems. I also just see us as closing the door on something that really doesn't have a whole lot of income to the entire system. And quite frankly, we need to be funding it. We're sending a message to the city council that, okay, let's let the public pay for this. Don't worry, we've got enough money. And the truth is, we don't. $35 million for a system that should be state-of-the-art, that we should be running frequent buses, and right now we're reducing frequency because we can't make the numbers work, and we can't get the staff to drive them. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So I just, my point is, I don't see how fares will have any impact on the issues at hand of our budget that is growing and our safety of operators, because those two issues have to do with other factors that we are not right now addressing.
I completely agree with you, and I think that what we, as an authority, have said in previous meetings and in the committee meeting yesterday is that we want to promote a safe and efficient bus system. I think we're pushing for that anyway. We're trying to find ways to address the shortage of bus drivers, the safety on the bus. I don't see going back to charging fares as, that's not related, in my opinion. Some people have brought it up, but that's not related. I think, frankly, we do know that we're going to have to increase our budget, and we're going to have to increase the amount we ask the city, recommend to the city council to fund Go Raleigh. We are expanding, we're doing BRT, we are introducing a newer and better bus system that can serve a bigger and bigger population of Raleigh. I think that kind of ask, I think returning to the fares shows that we're finding the dollars wherever we can. And I think that what we're proposing to do, or what I think we should do, is to go back to charging the fares, go back to making it available to someone if they can't afford the fares. We already had that system in place, but also reaching out to all the new people moving to Raleigh who are accustomed to paying to ride the bus, and the companies that are relocating here that can be asked to fund their employees who they want to use the bus to come to work. I think that there's a reason why there's not very many fare-free bus systems in the country. It may not pay for the system, but it allows people that use it to pay for transportation. If we are expecting to expand Go Raleigh to the point where we're saying this is a great system that deserves use by people for getting to work and getting to social activities and using it for their transportation rather than individuals in cars, then it's going to be something that should be paid for, and people will want to pay for it as long as we still have a way of reduced fares or free fares for those who can't.
I just don't think people have an expectation of not paying for public transportation. Like, nobody has that expectation until people start giving them an expectation of not paying for public transportation. And if we need money for the transit system, I don't understand us leaving money on the table and saying we need it at the same time. Like, you had some...
I just want to piggyback off what Bryce said. The assumption is we're thinking, you said hold off on the budget or prepare what the budget is going to get from Go Raleigh. But the assumption is you're assuming that the federal government is going to send money to the state and to the city to continue to do that. And then we're also assuming, hopefully, that the council will continue to give the same amount they gave last year. That's not realistic. And asking for a budget and continue to ask for a budget, or looking at the budget and say, what if, unless you do two budgets, if and reality. So I don't think that's going to work. But I agree, continuing to do free fare is not realistic because operations go up, things is going to cost. If we continue to go free, other things are going to get cut that we may not know about. Potentially jobs and other operations.
And we agree that we should be talking about safety, but I think that these are two separate conversations.
Right.
And even though I think this conversation helps with safety, but with the idea that you're talking about, it doesn't have to not be a thing because we're talking about this, because we're saying bring back the fares. It can be a card that the fares are on that people can afford to pay for the bus pays. And then we can use that to track the people, but we even need money to develop that sort of technology. Mm-hmm. So I think that...
Yeah, I echo Linda and Talulupe's comments. Nathan, regarding your comment about safety, I also agree that this is probably not a solution, but I invite us all to look back at data from pre-COVID, pre-free fares, where bus drivers complaining about safety issues back then when we had the 50% or 42% subsidized fare discounts that are available through those programs?
No, they were
Right.
not talking about safety. In this measure, their complaints was the contract and management. The complaints were not the ridership of the buses.
So I think if we have programs in place to help those that are in need, and I 100% recognize that there are people in need that will rely on bus transit, and that's the people that we're trying to help. The way that we're trying to help them is to increase routes, to increase frequency, to allow shelters, to provide benches. And the only way to provide these resources and these amenities at our bus stops and better service is to have a budget. And to me, it's a catch-22. The low fare or the reduced fare or the no fare for those that are in need, great. Those who can afford it, fantastic, pay for it. And those $3 million, that's not pennies. That's going to go towards something. And I agree with Linda that even though it's only 15%, 15% is better than nothing. And I fully support the fare.
I'll be brief, but I'll just add that, LaTanya, to your point, that was what I was asking for, was two options. Like, let's continue the process forward and see the full two options from staff before making a decision. And secondly, I'll just say that I think this goes beyond people who need free fares. This is a statement of the priority of how we want people to move around the city. I think as a transit authority, that we should want people to be able to have an easy and easy access to the bus. None of us pay to drive on the road. We subsidize way more than this budget for our roads every year. And I think as a transit authority, we should stand up and we should ask for more money for the transit system. And I think that one way to do that is to say that we need the money to keep the buses free and easy to get to, just like the road is. I would be willing to entertain, it's silly, honestly, that we talk about people having to pay to ride the bus and not ever to pay to drive on the road. And I think that we really, truly need to think as a transit authority what message we send when we say people need to pay to be on the bus again. We can think differently.
Well, people do pay to ride on the road. Gas is expensive. Car insurance is expensive, and car notes are expensive. But I think we're getting off the point, and we're debating this issue that there were already two special committee meetings and a meeting in our meeting that led to the special committee meetings. And each time that we've met, or you, and those have met that if we couldn't, because I didn't make the meeting yesterday, I think the tune is the same, that those of us that don't want to go back to free fares don't want it, and then that those of us that do. And then as far as the transit authority, this is a democracy. Everybody does not have to agree, but us voting and us not being held up or holding hostage those that are the majority that want something one way, to keep asking questions and budgeting to try to get us to do it the way the minority wants us to do it is unfair.
If I may also add, Jen, I'm fully on board with asking for more money. I don't think that excludes, going back to fares. I think asking for more money is a fantastic idea, so I support that.
And let me clarify before and I don't disagree, we should move on to a vote, but let me clarify that my issue is in part because I think that it's unfair to the people who can afford but shouldn't have to pay. But more importantly to me, I'm viewing it from a value standard in the fact that in 2020 there was a negative amount of parking spaces in downtown, that businesses were paying for Go Raleigh passes because there was no place for their staff to park, and it was more expensive for parking lots and parking garages. Right now, that is not an issue. So I don't see any reason why we're going to have companies coming in and paying for this. I don't see any reason why people are going to look at this and say, well, $90 a month, I can ride the bus, or I can continue driving it. I don't see the value there that we're giving until we have a system that we're really, really proud of. And right now, we don't have that. We have a system that is, quite frankly, broken. That is my point.
Can I make, and I know I say belaboring the point, but the median income in Raleigh is raising. When the income was lower, we didn't have this conversation about people not having to reach in their pocket to pay for the bus. Now that the people in the median income in Raleigh has gone up, we're talking about people who can fully afford to pay for the bus, not paying for the bus. We need the funds. And yes, we need to make a better system, but we need money to make a better system. Yes, we need to ask City Council to give us more money, but truthfully, our operators, we're cutting routes because we can't find operators, and that has nothing, and it has more to do with feeling like they're not supported, not because they wish there were more people riding the bus and it was free. So if we're talking about things that we can manage and things that we can work with within our grasp, like we've had people come and complain about that, and the operators, some of them, the ones that do come, have asked that. So at some point, we have to make a decision as a transit authority about making things equitable for everyone, not just our riders, but our operators alike, and making sure that we're providing a safe transit authority. But if we're talking about growing it, we're missing rural areas. We're missing a lot. There's a whole lot of infrastructure we could be talking about building, but we're kicking the can around an issue that's a non-issue, in my opinion.
Well, unless there's more discussion, I think we should vote on this so that we can move on to the issues of continuing to improve Go Raleigh.
Linda, I want to make a couple other comments. Assuming we are making a recommendation to the City Council, I think it is vital that we bring a budget to them with an explanation and a request for attention to the very serious issues that we're dealing with right now, particularly with concerns of our bus operators, and the reality of homeless people who have no place to go, that they're choosing, that they need to ride the bus all day as a place to get out of the heat and the cold. These are very serious issues that are tangential to what we're dealing with, and I think we need to highlight those. The City Council is not here when operators come and have concerns that they raise, and certainly I didn't know about these concerns because I'm sitting at this table. So I think it's really critical that we put everything in context, and also in the greater context of the Wake Transit Plan and the expansion. And yes, Nathan, I hear you that right now because of COVID, commuting has changed. But we don't know what's going to come in the future. We know that many corporations and businesses are requiring their employees to come back to work. So there's a lot we don't know in the future. And I also think my point about being a third option is we need to be open to what changes we need to make. We need to be flexible. We absolutely need to have smartphone accessibility, because part of why we chose, the decision was made to no longer charge fares was to not have physical contact. So people weren't dropping their change into a place that other people were touching. So if we're using smartphones, that's going to change that dynamic, and it's also going to speed up the process of people being on and off the bus. And that was also, some of our questions were about, is being fare-free improving on-time performance of our buses. So we got to keep it all in context. I don't think it's just an either-or.
I do want to add one more thing. The decisions that we're making here are also impacting housing. That's why we started pushing for the equitable development around transit study. If we care about housing, then that's a part of it too, right? And this BRT, and I've mentioned it before, is helping gentrify people off New Bern Avenue. So if we're caring about housing, and we're caring about ridership, and we're caring about all of that, and the people that come up New Bern is our #1 ridership, and we're allowing things to happen as a transit authority and making decisions here that are actually impacting them negatively, then it makes me wonder how much we really care about the things we're saying we care about. Or are we just saying we care about them because it sounds good to say we care about that stuff? Because we talk about our operators, but we're talking about fare freeze, and the operators want the fares to come back. We're talking about housing and homelessness and caring about that, and homeless riding the bus, but we're making BRT decisions, moving people out their houses, while we keep things in context.
We're getting away from voting and getting away from the topic again, but I'll say we've been paying monthly for that software, for the apps on smartphones. And I'd like to know, how can we move forward? We're paying for something that we're not developing. So I guess part of my desire to say, let's go back to fares, is because we clearly had a vision that we were moving to being able to use your smartphone. Let's do that. What's holding us up from moving to that? Especially when we're talking about, we've already got the infrastructure there, we're paying to keep it up to date, and who's supposed to push for us to move to that? I just feel like that comment was just like many of the other comments. It's moving us away from the topic, but part of what I think our responsibility as an authority is to prioritize decisions around growing and improving Go Raleigh. The longer we spend on something, a choice that was manufactured, frankly, is that much more time that we're not talking about those other items. Madam Chair, I don't know if I'm supposed to call for the vote or...
All those in favor?
Had a motion?
Yeah, we motioned it.
Yep, and it's been seconded. So all those in favor of recommending to City Council that we go back to charging for fares as of FY 2024, say aye.
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 All opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
Anybody abstaining? The ayes have it. We will be, as a transit authority, recommending to City Council that we reinstitute fares as of FY 2024. But I do think this is an opportunity for us to move forward and have further conversations about how we can perfect the transit system now that we've gotten that piece out the way. Okay, next item on the agenda is the Marketing Committee report.
Karen Ringe, I'm Chair of the Marketing Committee. First, I want to welcome Andrew Miller, who has just joined the marketing team, and he is our new marketing analyst, and we're going to make sure he's working hard because we have a lot to market. Andrea, is Het Patel going to give us an overview of the BRT and the BRT open house?
Yes, would you like that first?
Yeah, let's do that first.
Thank you.
Het Patel is our Go Raleigh staff person in charge of the bus rapid transit plan and process.
All right. Good afternoon, RTA Chair, Madam Chair, and members. I'm going to present an update that I presented to the Marketing Committee on the fall 2022 outreach for the BRT program. This is a condensed version of what was presented to the Marketing Committee, so we really have brought it down to kind of shorten the presentation in time. Currently, we are in what we call a virtual open house. This is kind of the environment that we started providing public engagement in during the pandemic. And I do have more postcards that Karen is sharing. If anyone is interested, I can give that to you guys right after this. So the virtual open house is from October 31st through December 2nd, 2022. If you visit the website, raleighnc.gov/BRT, it is the first thing you'll see on the website to basically get a status update on all the bus rapid transit projects. There are short videos for each corridor that are uploaded on the website as well. Now that we have somewhat come out of a pandemic environment, at least to an extent, we are having a lot more in-person meetings and a lot more in-person engagement. We do have a hybrid approach for the fall outreach sessions where we have a few Ask a Planner sessions where we're going to be tabling out at Go Raleigh Station for 2 different days from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., which are a lot more of the peak transit service times, as well as a full half a day at Raleigh Union Station from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., also allowing people to just stop by and ask questions at the table. And then we have one more event in person at the Town of Cary Regional Library in the afternoon towards the end of our engagement session. And then the one other date that's on there is a virtual Ask a Planner event for anyone that is not able to attend any of those in-person Ask a Planner events. We will be hosting that virtual Ask a Planner question and answer session through the public input website that we've done previously during the pandemic. So again, just kind of a brief update on what to expect on the website. It follows the same format that we had in spring 2021. It is a page within the BRT page that provides a status update on all BRT related activities, short videos, and then a schedule update for the BRT corridors as well. And the pages and videos can be translated to Spanish or provide Spanish captioning. How are we marketing this? So the postcards were one. We mailed those out to about 2,200 properties, tenants, as well as property owners directly along the 3 bus rapid transit corridors that have a route identified. I'm specifying that because the northern corridor at the moment does not have a route identified, so we did not do any postcard mailings on the northern corridor, but we did place yard signs along all 4 bus rapid transit corridors and high ridership bus shelters along all four corridors have those yard signs. We do have extra yard signs as well at Raleigh Union Station, so if anyone wants to put them out in their yards, now that some of the other signs are going to be going off the right-of-ways, if you want to put something out in your signs, you can do that. We are also sharing this update through the Wake County Libraries and the City of Raleigh Community Centers, so we have printed out the postcard, the printed postcards we've dropped off to those locations, as well as our printing flyers to drop off as well and making them available at those locations. And then lastly, we've always tried to have targeted outreach where people already are. And so we've identified a few pop-up markets where we're tabling at night markets and farmers markets. We've already attended 2 so far, and there's a couple others in the books that we are going to be attending during this month to try to meet people already where they are. And I think that's my last slide.
Are we working with TDM to get this out to companies to let them know about it? Big and small?
Yeah, we did work with TDM actually to table at Red Hat when the TDM team was out there, but we can definitely work with TDM to actually do some kind of a listserv or a newsletter sharing of information as well.
The locations at the library and I forgot the other location. Is it just the flyer talking about the meeting, or a little more information to say what it is?
So we've actually asked the libraries what they would prefer, and what they did was they requested the printed postcards that you guys have in front of you, able to share that with the patrons that are visiting the library. But we've also, if they've requested, we have basically a flyer handout for each corridor. We have printed that and dropped that off as well.
Details about the corridor or about the meeting?
No, those 4 handouts for each corridor have details about the corridor.
Okay.
And all of the information has the website that has all the information.
Well, I'm sure the website is. I'm just saying sometimes we miss opportunities by giving information. Like this flyer, it's cool, but if I'm coming to the library or I'm coming to the community centers, I may not can get to the meeting, but if it has the same information that's going to be presented at the virtual meeting, that could be an opportunity to just have the flyer explaining what the BRT is, where it's going to be, and it has the information. Then I can go to the website. Tell me about the meeting is a missed opportunity. Tell me about what the event is about.
No, that is correct. So we do have flyers for each corridor that provide a status update of the current design level or where the project is in the planning phase. Those are available if the library has space to kind of put them out somewhere. So if we, in our coordination, asked them and they said, we will print it out and put it out ourselves, then we've sent them the digital copies. If they requested the printing materials, then we've delivered them.
I also wanted to add that one of the questions we had for staff was, are we utilizing all the outreach that we have previously done through consultants in the communities and organizations and businesses and places of faith along the corridors? And the answer was yes, that they're continuing to send information to all those, because that was a pretty substantial list of contact.
My recommendation would use all community centers and all libraries, not just along the corridor.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, I hope everybody will attend one of these meetings virtually or in person.
Sorry, I missed whether are we putting QR codes in the stops along the corridors, so folks waiting for the bus can do those as well?
So we don't, one of the things that we provided in the detailed update was this round of engagement, we actually do not have a survey online. We're not asking for any specific feedback. It is more of a report out of the current project statuses. So we don't have a QR code that does take a link to a survey, but if you do visit the website, there is an option to leave a comment about any of the 4 projects and leave an open-ended comment if you wanted to. We also, and I don't know if this is going off topic, but there are some concerns with QR codes and how they're being used, so, yeah.
Oh, well, that kind of threw out my question, because I was going to ask if there's a QR code that could be made that goes to like a presentation instead of going to the website where they have to look for the information, something that'll send them to a drive or a presentation, or even if it's a link that can be put on the cards.
We can work with the link. I think the city prefers a tiny URL link, which is easier to access and remember as opposed to a QR code. So we could do something like that.
Jen.
I just have a general comment. We talked about this when we were talking about the update in route, but I think it's a missed opportunity to do public engagement without a survey. I think anytime we go out with information, we should have a couple questions that we ask. I understand it's not included this time, but I just really think that that's a missed opportunity to ask valuable information that we need.
How many surveys would you say we have already done for BRT since the beginning of the process? And because I don't disagree, we absolutely should be surveying, but I know we have done several.
I think we've done surveys during each phase or milestone of various projects so far. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but there's also coordinated efforts with station area planning, from planning and development, equitable development around transit, where there was always surveys for the past 2.5, 3 years. And so again, right now we are at a point in the BRT program where, again, I'm not saying everyone knows what bus rapid transit is. I know that there's still more to do from an education, engagement, and outreach perspective. But at the moment, we didn't have a need for feedback, and we didn't want to create a survey that wasn't going to be useful from a perspective of being transparent and providing feedback at the end of that process. So right now, that's why we're leaving that as an open-ended comment box.
I think to Jen's possible point is that even if the surveying isn't about the BRT, but if there's questions that we have, like he's asking about ridership and where people are going and getting that data, those could be missed opportunities just to ask questions to get information on our ridership in general.
Good point.
And the example that I gave in route committee was, do you plan to ride on the BRT when it's here? How do you plan to arrive at the BRT station when it's here? Which are valuable pieces of information that are needed between the 10 and 30% design phase.
Any more questions for Het? Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I also wanted to report in, Andrea Epstein gave us an update on how she's been spending the $50,000 that we received from TPAC to promote marketing for building ridership. And staff continues to try new outreach methods. One has been trying some paid ads at movie theaters, doing some paid ads at gas stations and convenience stores, the little screens that pop up when you're pumping gas, which I think were clever. We're continuing to do some paid ads digitally and in a variety of outlets, including the NNO, the Carolinian, and K-PASA, and paid print ads as well. In addition, we are trying a new sponsorship for WRAL's TV calendar, which pops up during the news, and we are twice a day, we're being listed as the sponsor for those calendar updates. And we're continuing to do the sponsorship of the traffic updates on 101.5. And some great news about that is we have been sharing the cost of that with the other GOs, Go Triangle, Go Durham, and Go Cary. And they have all agreed to continue the sponsorship for another year. So I'm really pleased about that. And the excellent thing about all of this marketing outreach and advertising that we've been doing, the staff has been doing for the last year and a half, is that we now have data. And moving to the next budget, the next point on the agenda, which is about a request that our staff has made to the to the TPAC, the Transit Planning Advisory Committee, for the next fiscal year, is we are actually requesting going from $50,000 a year to $200,000 a year for marketing. And we really want to, we had been at, for 1 year, we tried a $250,000 budget. And there's no question we can spend that money. And we are going to continue with a pretty aggressive marketing program. And the next step for that will be, assuming that the TPAC approves the funding, is we've got to develop a fresh advertising campaign, and that will be conversations at our forthcoming marketing committee meetings. So does anyone have any questions on that? And if you want to come to any of the marketing committee meetings with ideas, we would welcome it.
I would love to come, but a little early, but it's okay. Just wanted, going forward, just think of diversity and expand. Go ahead.
I have a hard stop. I'm sorry. So I didn't want to interrupt.
Your jacket.
I was just going to say to expand some of the radio stations or advertisements on other news channels besides WRL, because your audience doesn't particularly cater to that one station. So kind of think of other.
Absolutely. And I will say that we have paid a lot of attention to diverse media outlets in the past. That's just what we're currently doing. And one of the reasons we want to have a much larger budget is so that we can be much more diverse and reach more outlets. There's no question that that's really important. And we concur. Okay, so next on the agenda, October was Walktober month, and our TDM staff, which is Transportation Demand Management staff, have done some pretty creative outreach programs to encourage people to get out of their cars and walk, and including a Raleigh History Walk in Southeast Raleigh. They also tried something called Chocolate and Trains at Raleigh Union Station, doing a clever tour around Raleigh Union Station and the vicinity, and also promoting the fact that Raleigh has now taken on Vision Zero as a goal, which is to have 0 deaths from car crashes or crashes of pedestrians. And they did a walk-in-R, and all of those were well-attended and essentially sold out. So I commend Jana and the rest of the staff. One other thing, operator recruitment campaign. We have for 2 months been helping TransDev in promoting opportunities for a career in becoming a bus operator, and we've been helped a lot with outreach there, and we're going to continue to do that in the future because we need, and it has actually been working. The number of applications for bus drivers has really skyrocketed, so it's been really helpful, and not that we need to stop. And lastly, I should have added this to the agenda. It came up in as a reminder that, and I'm looking at Andrea, is there a way that we can work with the folks who are running first night so that we can publicize the opportunity for taking the bus downtown instead of driving?
Yes, we will work with them. We have a partnership with them for first night.
Great, that's wonderful. Does anyone have any other ideas or suggestions or questions or comments on marketing?
I was just going to say, it came up when we were talking to the Wake County Public School folks in the route committee that they might want to also talk to y'all. So I don't know if you want to add that to your agenda at some point. You already have a lot to do.
No, we talked about that at our last meeting. So yeah, it's definitely on the agenda.
What's first night?
Oh, it's a New Year's Eve big
Oh,
celebration
gotcha.
downtown, and it's extremely well attended.
I do have a question regarding first night. Made me think of the Night of Light. Is that what it's called? The Dix Park Night of Lights. Is there any transit or is there any way to promote using the bus or offer a bus ride through the Night of Lights, if that's what it's called? To, I don't know, get people.
Would anyone like to respond to that question?
I would say that we have not investigated that option, but if that's something that the board would like to pursue, we'll be happy to ask some questions and determine whether that might be possible. I think there are private operators that do run charters through there, so we would just have to determine with our existing fare structure as it exists right now, we wouldn't be able to charge. So who gets to go, I guess, is the question.
Us?
Yeah. So logistically, be a lot of, quite a few things to think through there, but certainly, again, if the board would like for us to look at that and report that out. The only other problem with that is reporting that back out would be too late because we'll be winding down.
That was random. I know it just came to me, but I figured it's another way to get people seeing the bus and using the bus. So if there's any options there, and I know it's usually a hellhole with cars trying to get in. So
Yeah, so I'll ask, maybe Andrea can put that on the FY24 potential work list.
there you go.
Well, they have a runner's day, so maybe the runners could take the bus.
There you go.
So that might be an option.
Any
Or think
transit
about
that
First
is-
Friday. More people, the First Friday events downtown Raleigh might be a good marketing plan too.
That's a good idea.
Sure you don't want to be part of the marketing?
I mean, if you move it later, maybe.
You're always welcome to come.
Are
Email's
you-
good too.
Was that your report? Are you good?
I am done with my report, Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
So that concludes our agenda. Is there any other items from staff that they want to?
No, our general manager, Mr. Byron Bryant, which usually does a quick update, is out today, so he is not here, but the report for September is in your package there. And so if you have any questions, he as well as transit staff will stand by to answer any questions if you do have those. And if you don't have them right now and you have them during the week, just give us a call.
All right. Any board members have comments, questions? I'm going to take my moment as holder of the hammer. One thing that our chair mentioned was the gentrification around BRT. There's actually a study that just came out this summer from Ohio State University that actually shows that that is not happening in the 11 cities that they studied over the last decade. So I'm going to be trying to get that out to y'all. So that gentrification is not coming because of BRT, that gentrification is happening throughout because of zoning problems and happening across the cities like ours, but that it's not BRT related because in
Demand
fact,
for living downtown.
it's not affecting it. So, all right. Thank you all for coming. We're done.
Thank you.